So the agenda says that at 1:20, I'm to welcome you back. So welcome. And we settle in for a few minutes. So if you don't mind, please settle in. Settle down. That's right. We'll get started in earnest here briefly.
Maybe just 5 minutes, I guess. Let people, I guess like 5 minutes and let people come back through. You think? Is it? I wish I didn't bring my little agenda thing on. That's maybe I didn't.
Well, welcome back, everybody. Raise your hand if you got to eat all of your lunch. All right. How many of you only were able to eat a portion of your lunch? Okay. No, there are at least two others with their hands up. Or how about no lunch? Tammy says she didn't get any lunch. Bob didn't get any lunch. All right. Well, we'll have to do better. Welcome back. Next on our agenda is our panel discussion, and it's a conversation between folks who have been in active recovery, moderated by co-moderators Matt Terrell, who is at Emory and Henry College. No, he is in New Jersey, and we're pleased that he is participating remotely today. And he is a licensed clinical counselor, and he is also the director of Emory and Henry's Addiction Counseling Program. So we're very glad that Matt is with us, and he has been part of the planning team as well. And in front of me is Tammy Bice, who we've heard speak moments ago. Tammy is the program director of Reviving Appalachia, our comprehensive harm reduction program that's based in the health department here in Smith County. And they are co-moderators, so I will turn it over to them.
Thank you very much, John. One greeting to everyone. Thank you for attending our panel discussion. We're really looking forward to this. Thank you also for allowing me to join via Zoom. And that is so that I also attend my wonderful niece's out-of-state wedding this week. So thank you for allowing that. So for the benefit of both our in-person and our live stream audience, please let me introduce our distinguished panel to give you some perspective on who will be spending some time with today. And this is in alphabetical order from your left to right. We have Joey Carroll. Joey serves as the Executive Director of Southwest Virginia Legal Aid. Joey serves on the boards of directors for the Planning District 1 Community Service Board, the Virginia's Judges and Lawyers Assistance Program, One Care of Southwest Virginia, and the Appalachian Center for Hope, who's hosting this event. He also serves as a member of the Appalachian Region Commission's SUD Advisory Council and as a member of the Supreme Court of Virginia's Veterans Advisory Committee. He is a U.S. Army veteran and is a member of the American Legion and the Veterans of Foreign Wars. Previously, Joey served the Commonwealth's attorney for Wise County and the City of Gordon as Virginia's Chief Deputy Attorney General and as a General District and then a Circuit Court Judge in the 30th Judicial Circuit. Joey is a recovering alcoholic and has been in recovery for over 8 years. Next, we have Kalani She now owns and operates her own small business, Creative Consulting Sunshine, which is focused on helping people learn how to use art to improve mental health. Parts of her business involve being Director of Education at the Art Place in Chilhowie, Virginia, curating art shows at the Henderson in Marion, Virginia, and volunteering on Virginia Board in some of Mount Rogers Community Services Preventative Services programs. Next, we have Crystal Glass. Crystal is a native of Smith County, Virginia, who has been in recovery for a little over 5.5 years. Crystal is currently a acute recovery specialist with the Virginia Department of Health, working with individuals in the Comprehensive Harm Reduction Program. She is also part of the research team from Virginia Tech, whose goal is to bring the community together to combat issues surrounding substance use disorders in Smith County. Her dream is to create more options for treatment and recovery by opening a recovery residence and nonprofit peer recovery center in the future. Next, we have Taranya Holmes. Taranya is a native and current resident of Kingsport, Tennessee, who is dedicated to helping find solutions to address the problem of addiction and its effects. As Vice President and Outreach Director of Uplight Appalachia, she is spearheading efforts to inspire and engage churches to help in this work. She works as a liaison among community organizations, clinics, and churches as they form collaborative relationships to help those with problematic substance use, trauma, mental health issues, and other struggles. She is also passionate about helping to address foster care needs across our region. Her own personal experience with short-term physiological dependency on opioids after major surgery opened her eyes to the biopsychosocial effects of substance use disorders and how important it is that we find solutions that meet all aspects of treatment and recovery. Her work in this area previously led her to serve as the Executive Director of the Holy Friendship Collaborative, on the Board of Directors of One Tennessee, and on the Strong Brain Institute Advisory Board. Just to let you know, the purpose of this panel discussion is to educate the public about addiction and its issue by bringing it out into the open, with these brave folks sharing insights, what they gained through their personal journeys. So let's begin the conversation now that we've been introduced to this panel. Let's begin by hearing from each of the panelists about what some of their challenges have been in their recovery process. Can each of you please speak on challenges or barriers that you face, not only from your inner circle, but also within the greater community, and perhaps even our society as a whole? Who would like to start?
I can start. It's Crystal. I think a huge challenge for me was finding other people in recovery here in Smith County. I started my recovery in Wilmington, North Carolina, and it is a community, recovery community where there was thousands of people in recovery, and we were all doing the same thing, and we were together and all of that. So when I came back home to Marion, it was really hard to find others in recovery. And, you know, it was hard for me because the biggest challenge was I knew what worked for me, and when I got here, it no longer worked for me. That wasn't working, so I had to create something to help me with my recovery. So that's a big challenge here.
And can you elaborate on that, what you created was?
Yes, I can do that. You know, just like from, I don't know, creation, I guess, if there was something that we needed, just like I needed, and if it's not there, you create it. I've learned that, and I created Creating Connection, which we've all been talking about today. And that was something that I needed. I needed that connection. I needed that support because I was not like, I completely kind of shut down because it was almost like grief when I left the program, my recovery program that I was working. And when I left, it was like I'm all alone. I have nothing. I was so scared. I didn't know what to do. I just knew I didn't want to get high again. But what do I do now, you know? So being able to do that was amazing. It started off pretty slow, and then my friend Jenny Moore hollered at me, and she said, hey, I want to commit to 1 year of helping you with this. And that's when we collaborated with the service board, community service board, and we have Creating Connection. And then we also have C3 Recovery, which it's Continue Creating Connection. And that is, we focus on art because I'm a very artsy person, but when I first got into recovery, that was something that I was afraid of, you know. I didn't want to dive back into that right away, just because it related so much to my active use. But I know what I needed, and I created it, and hopefully I know others have gotten a lot out of it. So I'm very, very grateful for that.
I would like to go ahead and follow Crystal, because the hardest thing for me, I noticed, was trying to find what I still liked and how I could go through life in a slightly different way. So I too created something, and that was my small business. So by doing that, I'm able to kind of immerse myself in that therapeutic world, so that I constantly have the art and the mental health specialists that happen to be around all the time to help me learn to be well.
Because when you're on your own, it's like,
It's terrifying,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Like
And
the
especially when you're
aftercare.
new to recovery and you don't really know, hey, I'm bored, what do I do right now? I would have gone out drinking with my friends or to a bar or something like that, or had people over and had a party. But what do you do now except for sit there and twiddle your thumbs?
Right.
So it's been very helpful. And like when the flood came, we didn't have those. That was very difficult, because those groups for some of us are a really big deal, and they have helped in our personal recovery along the way. So thank you.
good, you're welcome, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, my first, I guess the challenge that I faced when I first got sober, I got sober in a treatment facility in Birmingham. I stayed in there for 3 months, and the first challenge was I was afraid of relapsing when I got home, because I'm an alcoholic, and so alcohol's obviously everywhere, and it's legal, it's on every corner now, it's next to the candy bars and quick shops and all that now, and so it was constantly this reminder, and I had to learn to navigate the world with that constant temptation around me. And like them, I realized, I learned in treatment that I wasn't alone, which is a really great relief, because for years I thought that nobody understood me. And then I found out, well, there's a whole tribe of people that understand me. I just got to find them. And so I'm from Wise, so it's a small town like here. And I started going to the AA meeting there. I've obviously been a prosecutor and a judge. Some of those people I prosecuted or put in jail before, so it was a little weird, but it was okay. And I had resigned myself to the fact that I had to be honest when I came home from rehab. I had to be honest about my, what my issues are, and like I'm being now. And I didn't know how people were going to react to that. And so that was a challenge for me, because of the stigma surrounding not only alcoholism, but also, having went to treatment. And so I had to navigate that part of it. And as time's gone by, I would never say after 8 years, it's not gotten easier. I would never use that word, but I don't focus on alcohol like I used to. So time has helped me with that part of it. But I've also learned a lot of different tools, right? When I first, when I got home, I know you're gonna think this is weird, but and not after work is usually when I wanted to drink usually. And so I ended up going to barber school at night and got my barber license. So I'm a now practicing barber too, along with being a lawyer, but it's an art form. I mean, it really is an art. So I had to keep my hands busy. They thought I was weird in the school, because I was like, what's this lawyer doing in here in the school with us? But I was like, you know what? It helped. For 2 years I went to night school there, and it helped me stay sober. And I tell everybody that story because I think it helped me. And I think God gave me that to help keep me busy, because he knew what I would do if I had time on my hands. So.
Yeah, you must keep your hands busy.
Absolutely.
That's awesome. My husband's a lawyer, and I think he needs to go to barber school too to handle the stress. The stress. Yeah. But no, my situation is a little bit different in that I underwent surgery in 2014, and a week after that, I had to have an emergency surgery. That was unexpected, obviously, and it was very painful and very extensive, and 3 different doctors prescribed me opioids to handle the pain and stay on top of the pain. From that, I developed a dependency on them, and even though I was trying not to take them, I was trying to get off of them, I was trying to titrate down by myself when they just kept saying, you're not going to get addicted, you just got to stay on top of the pain. I knew something was wrong, but it took, speaking about needing connections, I was too embarrassed to ask for help. When your doctors are saying you're delusional, you're okay. and don't get me wrong, they were wonderful people, they just didn't understand themselves. So I needed help, and my husband was really busy. We had 2 young boys at the time, and he was trying to work and take care of me and them, and I was deteriorating into nothing. And finally, my mother went to a compounding pharmacist to try to see if she could find something that would help me eat. I had lost so much weight, I was literally wasting away. And she told the pharmacist what was happening, and she said, ma'am, you've just described classic opioid addiction. Your daughter needs help, and if she doesn't get it from her physicians, you all need to find it. So I wasn't getting it from my physicians. That was like the kick in the gut I needed to do something, get out of the bed, actually, and do something. So I didn't know where to go. And as a lifelong Christian, I wanted to go to my church, but I was embarrassed. I was too afraid of what people might think. And when I finally did call a church, kind of anonymously, I got, we don't know what to do. Sorry, call a counselor, go to rehab, whatever. And I was just scared to death. And so instead of doing what I should have done and going somewhere and getting treatment, I took myself off of them and about died. And it was a horrific experience. But I did, thankfully, have connections of family and very close friends, and then people that started to understand a little bit. And eventually, the church started catching on a little bit, but I was kind of angry at that point when I realized what was happening. So my biggest challenge at that point was saying, where's the church in all of this? And why don't they get it? And why aren't they helping? And why don't they have answers to guide us? So that was where I was at that point.
I want to say thank you all so much for sharing your experiences. It really, for me, kind of touches on a interesting point, and I think one of the key points as to why we're even having this whole event today is sometimes people genuinely don't know where to get help. They have to go out of town. They have to go out of their home area to find that help, or they have to try to just, flail through until they can come across something that is helpful for them, or they create it. And I think that is incredibly important for us all here, especially those that do work in this field, to remember we need more services. You can't have enough services to help people in this area. So thank you all so much.
And that's part of what was in my bio was, it's my dream to open a recovery residence here and a nonprofit peer. So, anybody out there that want to hook me up with that? So, but yeah, that is something is more options for treatment and recovery.
To Tammy's point, I'm wondering if the panelists can follow that up with what could the community do better to support people who are in active substance use or in recovery? What would people need more from the
what I'm getting now.
I think one thing I've noticed some folks in the community doing, one friend in particular with her own small business, trying to find ways to create new things for people to do. And those of us that do such things may not necessarily have the contacts to know how to utilize grants or things like that to make that possible. But there are quite a few people interested in just trying to find some way to create outlets, whether it be just for people in recovery or mental health issues, or just to bring everyone together to do things. My friend in particular, Hannah, I've spoke of, she's offered wanting to do like game nights and music things and putting out surveys to try to see how can we help people. And maybe some larger organizations could kind of take a note from that.
I love that. I love that idea, and I think that is incredibly important. Finding people that can, have the time or the capacity to contribute, and looking for ways, creative ways to find them, because it isn't always going to be the people in the office, doing counseling or whatever it is. So yeah, thank you.
I think kind of stepping out, being open-minded to change, and realizing that just because something's always went this way doesn't mean it always has to go that way. It's okay to not do something you used to, and it's not that you're doing a bad thing or a wrong thing. It's just educating yourself about how can I change, in order to help someone, because I always grew up not doing this or treating people this way. Learning how to be compassionate. And then, the flag will go up of, well, that's enabling, and it's just education and being open-minded to change in a community, that it's okay to change. Things don't have to stay the same as they always have been.
And I would have to add to that, when folks do put in that work and they do change, for members of the community to be a little bit more receptive as to not who they were, because when someone's been clean or sober for 2, 3, 4 years and they're still being treated as if they were still that same person, that is something that takes a great degree of education and learning that we really can change. And those people that we were when we were in active addiction or I was drinking every day, that is not who we are now. We've chosen something different.
I think just to follow up on what they're saying, I agree with that. I think what we're doing today is one step as to what a community can do. The whole thing about the ACEs presentation this morning, it's a trauma-informed approach, is what we at Legal Aid have trained all of our lawyers and staff in. All the schools are learning trauma-informed approaches too. All the different agencies we belong to are learning that too. And why is that? It's so that we understand, if people have been through trauma, how we can better understand them and treat them when we're dealing with them. Like the schools, if they're looking for kids who may be having stuff at home, so that they know to back off that kid at the school, to be easier on them or understand, and not to put them, you need to do that test today, that's the most important thing. No, it's not, it's their health. So the same thing, why not have SUD informed places? I mean, if more people in the community understood addiction better, then their stigma would be lessened automatically. Because instead of like what you went through with your church, and the reason is, I would suspect, is like my church and my family, they just didn't understand what I was going through. Unless you've been in addiction and in recovery, or you've been trained in that field, you don't understand, and it's scary, it's fear. So how do people deal with that? Well, they just like, I don't want that in my backyard kind of mentality, or I don't want to deal with that, not my problem. And it's just a fear thing. It's not because people don't have good hearts around here. It's just that they don't know how to deal with it. So if we teach them like we're learning in the community forum today, then hopefully they have they're like, oh, I know what to do. Oh, I know who to call for you. Yeah. Like that, right? Like an automatic.
Yeah. And to be really honest about that, it wasn't just my fear, it was my perceived fear. I don't know if they would have rejected me because I didn't reach out. And Mom always said, if you want to have friends, you got to be a friend, right?
My granny said that too.
Sometimes, though, it's really hard when you're under duress, when you're going through something that there's a stigma attached to. You don't really have the tendency to do the reaching out yourself. And that's why I was angry at that point. But we talk about change, and we talk about how those going through recovery or struggling with addiction are perceived, how others might react to them. And we talk about changing. You know, I was capable of change. I'm able to change. But I was listening to a podcast that Tanner and Andy with Uplight did the other day, which I highly recommend the podcast. But the man they were interviewing in Scotland, he said, it wasn't that I needed to change from being a bad person to a good person. I'm the same person. Is I needed to get well. And I needed people. I needed connections to help me get well. So that's the need. The church is fully capable. I mean, let's face it, with the opioid epidemic, with fentanyl, with everything we have going on now that people can get addicted to, our phones and all of that, we need an army of help. And there's not enough counselors. There's not enough public health officials. There's not enough correctional officials or government leaders to address this problem. We need an army. And, you know, our goal through Uplight is to educate the church and trauma-inform the church, inform them about addiction, give them the tools. I mean, you're equipped. If you love people, you're equipped. And God will equip you. If you don't feel like it, just believe it. You just got to love on people. So I really feel like that these challenges can be overcome if we look at all these solutions and realize that there's more than one solution, there are multiple solutions, and we've all got work to do.
Yeah, and to that point, thank you, Joanna. That was some great input. We talked about challenges. We talked about what else the community can do. It's not all doom and gloom. Can each of you talk a little bit about what was helpful to you? What were some of the positive experiences or connections that you had that have helped you in recovery? So we can educate the community about what works.
Or things, even just to add to that, things that you may be utilizing now that's helpful to you.
I can definitely speak on that one because of Crystal's idea and her help from Jenny. The Creating Connections programs are absolutely wonderful. C3 and Creating Connections, they're opportunities sometimes for folks who want to learn to teach, to actually have a chance to lead a class. It's a way for folks to get to know one another, speak openly, literally without that fear of judgment, and we all kind of take care of one another in that different way because we're all there for a reason. So those programs have been absolutely priceless.
For me, it's the 12-step program. I worked the steps as soon as I got out of treatment. They told me, they said, get home, go to 90 meetings in 90 days. I did that, which is a little hard from Wise County, but I went all over the place and got to meet tons of different people too, actually in different counties, even in East Tennessee. And so, and then they were like, get a sponsor. And so I got a sponsor, I worked the steps, and I did exactly like they told me. And I'm a big advocate. I know you can get sober in other ways than the 12 steps, but if I sponsor somebody or somebody asks me for what happened to me, I advocate for the 12 steps. To me, it helps. Not only, it's not just about not drinking or drugging, it's about how you reform your life. And it's really there's a lot of spirituality. I mean, listen, if it weren't for God, I wouldn't be here right now. So, and that helped me get closer to God. It helped me with my faith and my family. Just working the steps, and I still have to constantly, rework the steps. And I'm very heavily involved in my egg home group, and I like being here. Today helps me. Being on this panel helps me talk about my stuff. So hopefully I'm being useful to somebody out there.
And I'm going to definitely pick up on this, because I was 12-step, in another program to the core. I lived it, breathed it, ate it, everything, because I wanted to live. I had everything memorized, the 12 steps, any of the literature, I had it memorized because I wanted to live. And that was what my recovery was based on in Wilmington. And I get back here, I know in Wilmington we had like 100 meetings a week, okay, that you could go to. There was just so many. And when I come back here to Marion, there was one meeting a week. And at that meeting, there was just things that I could not accept, you know, about how people were being treated. And it was just awful, you know, and I didn't feel right in my soul sending someone there that I knew was gonna get treated like crap, okay? And that would destroy them, you know. I know that if I hadn't been strong in my recovery, you know, I don't know, it was a bad experience. And so when I left, I was grieving because that's all I knew to stay clean. That's all I knew to live was those 12 steps and to stay with those people. That was my tribe. And then my tribe hurt me, you know. And what do I do with that? It was very painful. That was a painful relationship to disconnect from. But I did it, you know, and then I created something that Crystal needed. And I know if Crystal needed it, there was a lot of other people that needed it. I know it's not the answer, you know, to all of it, because I truly, in my heart of hearts, believe the 12 steps is the answer, one of the answers, because you find out a lot of information about you and how you respond to people. And like I know Joey was saying earlier, I think it was Joey, about I can't tell you that your life's gonna be easier. My life has not been easier at times at all, but it's better. It's better than those days that I laid in a bed, curled up, screaming and crying, terrified because I thought horrible things was going on. I didn't want to go back to that, so I was willing to do everything. I did everything they told me, and I stuck with it. That was a really hard choice for me, and right now, you know, creating connection, that's my lifeline, you know. That is part of my recovery, and you know, I know that in there, it saves me, you know, and I want to be saved today. I want to live today, and navigating that roadmap of what that looks like has changed. I mean, there's all kinds of back roads, let's just say, you know, on my map today of navigation through my recovery, because if something doesn't work, I have to try something else, because I know I don't want to feel the way I used to feel, or I don't want to feel any pain or fear or whatever now. So, oh God, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? You know, so just keep on going, you know, hang in there. That's what my Nana used to tell me was, hang in there. And those simple words are life-saving. Hang in there, you know. So yeah, I think too, the positive thing, sorry I got sidetracked, but the positive, one of the things that helped me is expressing gratitude. There's always something to be grateful for, and I know like when I look out and I see like coming over, I call it the new road, but it's not new anymore, but I go over that hill and I just see this mountain and it's beautiful, you know, and I just smile and I'm like, thank you. I express gratitude to God because that's who I owe it all to, and if it wasn't him, and he paints me a beautiful picture every morning, and it's beautiful, and I'm so grateful for that. But if there comes a time that I'm ever down, I have a children's dictionary. It's actually in my office at work, and if I ever can't think of anything because I'm just rattled, I'll grab that dictionary and I'll blindly point to the letter A of something. Thank you, God, for Appalachia. You know, thank you, God, for Bonanza. You know, all those things. And oddly enough, which, by the way, there is still a Bonanza restaurant over in Lebanon. I had no idea. And we went and ate there last weekend, and I was in heaven.
I remember their ice cream machine.
That's because you didn't get to finish lunch, Crystal.
I have to tell you, I was thinking about Bonanza earlier.
See, this is what I mean.
when Mr. Cartwright was speaking. Y'all remember Hoss? I'm dating myself. Hoss Cartwright.
Because I definitely.
I never hear that joke because I'm around people too young to get it.
Okay. I'm right there.
But that was definitely what I was going to finish saying was each time I do that, it's crazy how those words that I pick, just like right now, how I see it or I hear it, and it's just like confirmation that I'm all right, and I am safe, and I am well, and I am loved, and I am so grateful. So, yes, Bonanza, I knew it. God would make such an impact.
I think as far as what's most helpful for me, as a Christian, I knew I needed Jesus, period, the end. He got me through it. He's my healer. Jesus plus nothing. But I did enjoy the help. I appreciate the help. I do desire that help from others. Those connections are so important, and understanding of what we went through, why we went through it, trauma, ACEs, all of these things, becoming educated on those things opened my eyes to a whole new way of seeing this whole situation, a whole new way of seeing other people, a whole new way of seeing myself and how I relate to others and this world. And it gave me a purpose. And I think having a purpose is very helpful, whether it's your work, family, friends, missions, whatever it might be. That is also helpful in the work that I get to do with Uplift Appalachia every day. Also, going through all of this opened my heart to taking in a 13-year-old boy. What was I thinking? But he was born addicted to multiple substances, and his first 13 years of life were horrific. You know, ACE exam for me, I have 0. He has 10 on his. So he's 18 now. We adopted him at 15. He is precious. He is loved. We are loved, and it's been an amazing journey. So having a purpose and being able to take what we've been through and use it for good, allow the Lord to use it for good, I think that's been most helpful.
That is such a question. All of this conversation is so rich. We talked about challenges overcome. We talked about what's helpful. Something else that came up was how you have learned about your own addiction through your recovery process, and how people who don't have a personal history of addiction may not be able to understand. So let me ask the panelists, each of you, to talk about what would you want people who don't have a history with substance use or other addiction to know about your experience or just about addiction in general that might help destigmatize it a little bit?
I think
I know that's a deep, thoughtful question. You know, maybe folks can't understand, but I'm going through it. What would you want them to understand?
I think I would want people to understand that just because someone appears quote unquote normal doesn't mean they're not struggling, especially those who have both substance issues and mental health illnesses. Some of us can go through life and no one would ever have a clue that anything is wrong. But maybe that off smell of alcohol at work or even at school, because for me, I was drinking in high school, at high school. So there were a lot of folks that I would like to say should have noticed, but they didn't, and there was maybe no reason to have then. But maybe not judge so fast, but pay attention, because some of those straight A students are the ones doing that to make sure you're not noticing the underlying issues. I was one of those kids who would have hit that 10 scale easily. So I look at things now and with the way I raise my son and want to treat him differently. And we have very open conversations with him, both my fiance and I, about things in life and very real, so that he doesn't step into this illusion of life being this imaginary thing We want him to understand that mental health issues are real. Substance use disorder issues, those are very real, and we don't want him to think that that can't happen to him. We educate him about nicotine use and causing growth problems and little things just to try to make sure that he understands, because of what we've lived through. We want to make sure that he can have a better chance.
I'll follow up with, I agree with you, and just to follow up on that, I always thought that I was immune from being an alcoholic. I mean, I was in the military and in a fraternity and all this. I mean, just drinking all the time. Yes, and it's a part of, and being a country boy, I mean, you drink a little bit. And so I never thought I would have a problem with it. And I always thought that that's not going to be me. That cannot be me. I'm too disciplined, right? I thought I was just too disciplined for that. And you never know. And so I was just very naive about that. But then I was adopted at birth. And so I found out later, though, my biological father died of alcoholism in his late 30s. I found this out later. And then my biological mother just passed away about 15 years ago from alcoholism. I mean, so, and you know, genetics can play a part. I'm not a scientist and I don't know that, but some people say you need to watch that if it's in your family. Just be careful about it. It's one of those things you should be attuned to. And so I don't know that again, thinking that I was not immune to it, I don't know if I'd have known that 40 years ago, if I'd have still been careful about it. But it's something I would have thought about at least. And if I'd have been educated more about it, I'd been like, probably need to be careful with drinking at all. And just staying away from it. Because, I mean, what I learned is abstinence is only, there's no moderation for me. If anybody has one drink, I think they're crazy. I mean, that's not how I do things. And I was never a one drink person. And looking back at it, I see in my past, I see that I was a very unhealthy drinker. Even before I started drinking every day, I was still an unhealthy drinker because I'd binge drink on the weekends, things like that. Again, thought I could control it. I thought I was in control. I've never been in any control of any of that. So
think
that was
we
the
all
big
have that
fallacy.
illusion
Yeah,
that we are.
yeah. That was what I would say.
And I'm the same as I thought I could never have a problem as well. I mean, I sold drugs. I was a pharmaceutical sales rep for many.
You too. That didn't come out quite right.
I scared you all, didn't I?
No, I was going to be impressed, actually.
No, that's not fair.
I should be in prison. Actually, maybe for selling pharmaceuticals. No. But yeah, I knew what that industry was like. I knew, I obviously was educated about the mechanism of action of drugs and how they worked and, you know, what caused addiction. And I knew all that stuff, but here I was, Miss Zero on the ACE scale, struggling with addiction. So it can happen to anyone, and I think that's important for everybody to know and to understand, and I believe, as Mr. Cartwright said, we all struggle with something, whether it's addiction to drugs or anything else. Even you can be addicted to yourself. You know, you can, whatever you put out there as your idol, that's an addiction, and we have to conquer that. So just educating everyone on, we're all in this together. We are, you know, it's not like we're all those people that need to be in these meetings on Thursday nights, and then if you get clean, you can come on Sunday mornings and rejoin society. That's not it. We're all in this together.
Yeah, I think with community, it's just, you know, like this is a real thing, you know. I think so many people disassociate from it because it's not real to them. You know, it was very real to me, you know. I experienced psychosis in my active use, and so I was extremely terrified all the time. My life, it was horrific. I just can't, it was horrific. So I know that when I see individuals who are experiencing that, like my heart breaks for them. And it is so real, okay? And just to think, you know, you may see them and they're acting all, you know, whatever think of me, you know, when you see them. Think of this panel, you know, when you see somebody like that, and know what they're experiencing is real, and it's scary, and it's a real problem, you know, and we can't just keep turning our heads and, you know, snuffing up our nose when they don't smell good, you know. I mean, I get it to an extent, but at the same time, it's like, don't let that stop you from giving someone a hug that may just need a hug, you know, or whatever, or stopping and talking to them, like being a human being, you know. I think a lot of us just forgot what that even was, you know. I think it's just real, like all of it is so real, and I feel like putting that wall between you and the rest of us, because I'm going to say us, because me, you know, that wall needs to come down. It does, you know, and I've heard that expression of, well, instead of building a wall, take that material and build a bigger table. You know, I think that's something that we definitely need to do, you know, and it's okay. It's okay to be compassionate. I know you have to think about your safety. I understand that too. I really do. So always look at your surroundings, but it's okay, you know, to be okay with what's going on. Our community is very sick. You know, I was very sick, and I need a different level of care than some other people. You know, some people can go to one meeting a month and be fine, or go, you know, whatever. I was sick. I had stage 4, you know, it was not good. And, you know, I just kind of wish that, I don't know, like nobody, it was weird, you know, when you go through addiction and, you know, you see someone else going through it, your first thought is not, oh, I hope they're doing okay and their family's doing okay and we'll fix them some dinner and take it over. That's just not how it is. And, you know, I don't know. I just would like to see a shift.
I think our area and kind of our lifetimes here, it's hard for people to see it, not because they can't, they don't want to, because it's terrifying. To actually stop and take a moment to think that we literally have people in this tiny area dying all the time for no actual good reason other than the fact they couldn't get proper help or didn't have the resources to do so. I know we're responsible for our own choices and we have to own our actions. But if there aren't enough resources or isn't enough readily available information to the public, lots of people aren't just gonna ask, they're terrified to ask for help. I was taught, by the grace of God, by a family member, how to get mental health help at 19 when I had to be hospitalized for the first time. I was severely alcoholic and suicidal. So when she told me how I could get help and that it was okay to commit myself to get a medication adjustment, it was terrifying. I couldn't even go back to the same job. I couldn't look at those people again. Right. It changed everything for me, but I was taught at an early age that it's okay. So learning those tools for me has kept me alive, just knowing that when I'm feeling that way, when I'm a little too far gone, I now know those numbers to call and keep them on me, keep them memorized. If I see someone struggling, just try to give them that information, but just making sure that enough of it is readily available for everyone, especially those who are afraid to talk about it.
Because, I mean, even if you're the person, if you're afraid to approach them, then have a pamphlet or something in your car. Hey, here, I can't personally help you, but here, you know, I don't know. I mean, that can...
So if we can, some of us keep those resources, and I keep them in my purse, I keep them on Facebook, but those different things, where can you get a warm meal? Where can you sleep? Where are places to charge a phone if you've gone through an issue? Those things, for some people, are life-changing. And once they get that little bit of help, I've watched it happen in the last year, not just for myself, but for others. Once they get that little bit of help, that meal, that roof, that something, their whole life can begin to change. I've watched people go from being homeless and without to having a home and doing well, and all of a sudden starting to do amazing things that they never even dreamed possible.
Thank you all.
Let me interrupt there, just because you're making so many great points about what we want people to understand. I think it's also relevant to honor family and friends who are affected, by addiction. You know that that's the person who is maybe in addiction, it's not the only person affected. So honoring the family, friends, co-workers, everyone else, who was affected. What would you want to say to family and friends for them to know about addiction? What would you want, if we were to turn our attention to those who go along that experience with you, what would you want to say to them?
I know with me, when I was thinking about creating connection, I think I experienced, I don't know how else to explain it other than survivor's guilt, because there were meetings for me. There were I could go here to Mount Rogers and get something or whatever, but my family couldn't. I hurt my family. I destroyed lives, okay? And what are they left with? They're left holding that in their hand, and they are hurt, and they are scared. What help can we have for them? So with creating connection, I definitely wanted my mom there, I wanted to heal with her. My sister, my daughter has even been there. I wanted it to be a space that it's not just closed to people in recovery. It is for families to heal together. Because I was so upset that, I want something for my family, so they can heal as well. We need to heal together.
I agree with what you're saying. I think that understand that your loved ones are going through trauma during your addiction and recovery, and that they need help too. They need to recover from your recovery. So providing resources for them as well. And there are organizations that are providing those resources. It's a matter of finding them. Some churches have them, some nonprofits have them, communities offer them. There's a great organization that I've worked with in the past called Grand Families that support, parents raising their grandchildren. That's very prevalent right now. So those resources are out there. Get involved, and if you don't see them, create them.
Absolutely. Thank you all so much for sharing. I do feel like this is one of those areas that I can chime in, and really I feel compelled to kind of give a message to individuals who are in a family system where they do have somebody experiencing active addiction. I didn't fall into this field just randomly. About 15 years ago, I was in my undergrad doing psychology. My plan was to go into mental health in some form or fashion, but to be honest with you, never had I ever thought that I would wind up with a focus towards substance use. And that is because I have a lot of family members that have experienced that, are experiencing that, and a lot of people that I love. And to be honest, and I'll just be completely transparent here, it took a long time for me to even have the empathy. We're talking about needing to establish more empathy in the community and with families and people to support individuals towards recovery. That's 100% true. For me, it was. And I was very fortunate in that 15 years ago when I was in my undergrad, I also worked at a residential treatment facility in a crisis stabilization unit. So that was kind of my initial dive into this field. And I have learned so much since then. I have grown so much since then, to the point that I certainly realize I had no idea how to support somebody that I loved in active addiction. All I felt was anger towards them. Like, why are you doing this? Why are you not blah, 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 doing whatever else? And I grew up in a household with an individual. We, same parents, same everything. She went one way. We both have high ACE scores. She went one way, I went the other. And it was very hard for me to understand that. But education is key. Education is key. And being open enough to learning about how the brain works. Keith touched on this so wonderfully earlier. And it is a huge, huge point to make. We have to be willing to learn more about addiction. If we truly want to support people with this issue, we have to be willing to hear them. And I hope that individuals don't take that in a manner of, I'm not saying enable. That's not what I'm saying. It's incredibly important to have boundaries with all people, especially people in active addiction, and I think we can all recognize that. Boundaries are key. You as a family member, too, absolutely have to keep yourself mentally well. If you want to be supportive towards somebody in active addiction, if you're not mentally okay and you know, you're just completely impacted by what their behaviors are doing, it's going to be hard for you to do that in the best way, or the most helpful way, rather. So certainly reach out to me at the health department. I am more than happy to help give some tips. I certainly can't fix any issues for family systems by just a quick tip, but I've had to learn a lot of different ways to just give folks grace. And I have learned so much from people in active addiction. We do have this, I think it's a societal issue, truly, where growing up, we've been impacted by someone that was under the influence of substances. They did something that we didn't like, it hurt us, it made us angry. And then we've generalized that as a society, along with so many other things that we've generalized in society. But it really has impacted how we look at other humans. We're all humans. People who are potentially shooting up down the street, they're a human at the end of the day. And I think that we all need to come together and truly do, you know, an internal deep dive. Ask yourself, why do you feel like this person is not worthy to be treated like a human? And start from there.
Really wonderful things that Tim and everyone on the panel. Just want to let the audience know that we are going to leave a little bit of time at the end for open Q&A if you have a question that you would like to ask the panel directly. We'll get to that in a few minutes. We just have a couple more questions for the panel now. I'd like to shift focus a little bit to honor and reflect on the aftermath of Hurricane Helene and frame it in terms of addiction and recovery. So I'd like to ask panelists, how might you view your recovery in the context of such a regional tragedy? For example, consider how such an event might have impacted you while you were in active addiction or active use versus how you have navigated while you were in recovery.
So,
Maybe we start with Joe. We haven't heard Joe yet. Maybe Joe.
Thanks, Matt. No, when I talked to Mac a few days ago too about these questions, but the pandemic had more of an effect on me than Helene did. I mean, we had some stuff happen in our home, but it wasn't anything like what people went through in Damascus and East Tennessee and other places throughout Southwest Virginia. So we were blessed, but I would have used that any excuse, any catastrophe where I was not have to be around people would have been an excuse for me to get obliterated drinking. I mean, so that's how I would have treated that if I had been an active alcoholic at the time of this. Like, I can't come to the office because, no power, even if that may not be true, because I would lie. I mean, to protect my drinking time, I would lie about that. So that's one of the things that how I would have treated any sort of, the COVID, I can't even imagine what I would have been like if I had been an active alcoholic at that time. It had probably been really bad for me.
my heart really went out to those who were probably struggling in active addiction or in MAT or a recovery program, because number one, if you're actively addicted, you're probably cut off from your supply and going immediately into withdrawals. Number two, same with MAT. Number three, if you're in recovery, you're disconnected from your people and your community. I just heard that there was a group of 20-some people that was just discovered like 2 days ago. They'd been cut off from everybody for 26 days. That's astounding to me. So the effect that this has had on our region is going to be long-term, long-lasting. A lot of people are traumatized and are going to be looking for connections and ways to recover. And substances are one of those things that many will turn to. So we need to be aware of that. And we need to continue to realize that our region is going to be recovering from this for a long time, and individuals are going to be recovering at different rates, and we need to be prepared for that. But personally, too, if you all can think, if you were here when that storm was happening, if you were close to anywhere that it was happening, what your thoughts were. What did you do? For me, mom of 3 boys, I was like, do we have enough water? Do we have this? Do we have, can we get to the higher ground? Blah, 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 you know, what are we going to do without power for 40 days? You know, all these things just ripping me apart. You immediately go into your fight, flight, all that stuff, and you're not thinking, you know? And that's how people are in addiction. What you were thinking in those moments, that's like, they call it your serpent brain, because your prefrontal cortex isn't doing anything during that time. It shuts down, and you're not thinking. It's just survival. And that's what a lot of folks in addiction are thinking every single day, is survival. And we've got to give them that love, that connection, that purpose, and guide them through healing so that that they're not living that way forever.
I think if I had still been drinking or using anything, because for many years I didn't really care, it was just kind of whatever, just drinking was the worst one. But I mean, I wouldn't have been able, we didn't have direct damage. So what we did the very next day is start trying to help the friends that we could. Before, I would have probably been laid up drunk or in DTs if I couldn't get to alcohol quickly enough, because when I drank daily, the shakes would come, the nausea, and all the things. So I would always have a great physical impact if I didn't have it that day.
Oh gosh, I actually thought about this during the hurricane, and I don't even know what would have happened in my active use. I mean, it would not have been good, because I thought I had to have it. You know, like in my mind, I was convinced I had to have it. You know, there was even a time where I thought if I wasn't using, this is a lot, but I thought my friends and family were being hurt if I wasn't using, you know. So I would use to be like, okay, well then I'm just hurting me. I don't want them hurt, you know, and that was my reality. So I probably literally would have done anything to keep them from hurting, you know, in my mind. Wow, it's such a trick. Like, it plays such a trick on you, for real. And, you know, I know not everybody gets that far in, but I pray they don't. God, I pray they don't. But yeah, it would have been tough.
Okay, we've reached the time where I'm going to ask for some concluding remarks from each of our panelists. So, if there was anything that Tammy or I didn't ask you about that you think is important for our audience to know, you can share about that. And also think in terms of what would you want to say to folks who are in the thick of addiction now, couldn't imagine themselves where you are today, or have any recommendations you make for people who are struggling with addiction or their family and friends. So, 5 comments on things from each panelist, please.
Joey.
All right. It's okay. What I would tell anybody, first of all, I've doubled down on all the things I've already said, and there's no, for people who think it's too hard to get sober or clean, okay? I thought there's no way in the world I could get sober. I was like, there's no way I can stay. After I got sober in treatment, I thought, I'm gonna relapse. I had in my head, I was so worried about relapse, like I said. But I did everything they told me, all the people who were trying to assist me, and they told me, they gave me advice. I followed that advice, and it was literally one day at a time. Everybody hears that, it's cliche, I know that you think it is, but it really is the truth. And they said, if you'll just keep your head down. I told all my people at treatment, I was like, my doctor, my counselors, I said, I'm afraid I'm gonna relapse. I'm gonna go home. Alcohol's everywhere. And I was like, and they're like, don't catastrophize, Joey. They were like, you just do one day at a time. You don't have to be sober for the next 20 years. You do one day at a time. And I did that. And so 8 years later, here I am, right? Because I did exactly like they told me. Now, that doesn't mean every day was easy, like you're talking about. It's not. But, and I couldn't do it alone. And first it takes God, but God hooks me up with all these people, right? My whole tribe, who helped me get through that next day, or that next moment some days. So, and they give you a toolkit of all these different things you can do, so you can do this with assistance. And again, you're not alone. So that's what I would say to people.
I would kind of like to reiterate that part, is that you're not alone. And people, I know it's terrifying to ask for help, but if you could find one friend, one person you trust. Some of us are readily available at like Creating Connections and the various groups through Mount Rogers and the health department, kind of every time they're there. So if we can give resources, if it's just a quick, hey, I mean, I might need to know an AA meeting, which, speaking of which, I had a friend ask, I would like a complete list at some point. But I didn't use meetings. I used intensive therapy due to my mental health reasons as well. For me, it was better to do that one-on-one, literally for 2 straight years, and just dive in. But you kind of have to be willing to really look within yourself. Those things that you don't want to own and you don't want to say are real, you kind of do have to, and then just start speaking with someone. If that person doesn't listen, speaking with someone else. And there are often people who will just notice, and by going to Creating Connections and things like that, the people, if they happen to notice, they're likely going to reach out and try to help and not judge because you happen to be in active addiction. That's what we're there for.
Absolutely. I think a little bit different. What I would tell someone in active use right now, and especially someone who is far out there and your reality isn't making sense and you're scared, it'll be okay. Like, your mind is literally playing tricks on you, okay? And trust me, I know you're having a lot of trouble trusting anybody in the whole wide world right now, but trust me when I tell you that it will be okay. It'll be okay. Nothing that is going on right now is real. Nothing. I don't care what your mind is telling you or what you're seeing or hearing, but listen to me. Because I've been there. Listen to me. It'll be okay. And I love you. And that's what I would do.
Amen. I mean, you are created for a relationship. You're created in love. You're created with value and worth in your Creator's eyes. and you are worth it. And healing is hard, and working with people who are going through it is hard. But as my mentor, Andy, who's going to speak in a minute, says, it's hard, but it's worth it. But it's hard, but it's worth it. But it's hard, but it's worth it. And depending on the day and how it goes, you don't know if you're going to end on it's hard or it's worth it. But you're going to get up the next morning and know that it's worth it. So stick with it, like she says.
Those were all such great messages. And let me just send a personal thank you to each of our panelists for having the courage to, number one, share your stories and your insights today, but also to walk the walk that you do every single day. So thank you. I'd like to turn it over to Tim and John for the open Q&A portion of our panel discussion.
Awesome. Yes, we will take Yes, would anybody like to ask any questions to our panelists? Don't everybody run up at one time, y'all. Or even if you just have a comment.
Yeah, so, clearly there's a strong faith element up here on the stage. And my faith and many faiths are built on a foundation of healing. That's what the faith community is all about. Too many times I hear stories like yours and like others where, in my mind, when I'm in a tough spot and healing is required, ideally the faith community would not only be the first place that comes to mind, but the place I would feel most comfortable going. That is not the case in a lot of spaces. So I would just ask you, I had to think about how I present this as a question and not as a rant. So I would ask you all, in the interest of, I've spent a lot of time the last couple of years out building trauma-sensitive schools, trauma-sensitive communities, trauma-sensitive families. Frankly, the most resistant part of that is often the faith community. So I would just ask you, sounds like many of you have leaned on that, maybe have done some work to educate and bring them around to some trauma sensitivity. But to me, knowing that seems in my world to be the greatest opportunity. The doors are open every week for literally thousands of people to come. And whether those communities know it or not, they're all coming with various hurts, looking for healing. So I would ask, what can we all do in our faith communities that would make it the first place we would think of and not the one we're most afraid to go to?
John took my microphone. It's fine. I'm glad you asked that, because as a former prosecutor and a judge, you can imagine how many times they were sitting in front of me going, while they were in jail, they found Jesus. I heard it so many times. And in the Army, we call it foxhole religion, right? So I never lead with that conversation about faith initially, and God understands why I don't do that, because when I was in treatment, they taught us, the steps talk about a higher power. It doesn't, and it says God a lot, but it means any higher power that, if you don't want to make God your higher power, and it's something else, it can be your AA group, can be your higher power, as long as it's something other than yourself, right? So I try to explain this to people, and they taught me this, and I never got mad at God, really, but I met a lot of people in treatment who've been mad at God and gave up on God and thought God had let them down. And so, I try to keep an open mind about that, and I just tell them, if they start with saying, Joey, listen, I'm mad at God. God let me down. I don't want to hear any of your stuff. And I'll be like, hey, you don't have to figure that part out right now. It's the first step of Alcoholics Anonymous is to admit that you don't have any control. Your life's unmanageable, right? And you're powerless over alcohol. So that's the first step. It isn't about God at that point. And sometimes people come to understand God and love God eventually. I've seen it happen. And they told me it was going to, they told me early in treatment, they were like, some people who are mad at God, they come around. It just takes time, and they have to get their own way. Nothing you can do about that, Joey. And plus, my sponsor always tells me, I can't save nobody, right? And I need to stop acting like I can. And every time he'll, hit me upside the head if I start acting like I can, because I can't save nobody. So I try to go with it like that, so that it's not in your face type thing. God will deal with them. I'm not God. God will deal with that in his own way with that person. So
I would like to kind of add to that, because I think, yes, I am a Christian. I have not spoke about that much, but that's literally my reason, is I don't lead with that because, and I've sat through a church service in that relation about homelessness and drug usage and things of that sort. It's one of those, if you first meet someone who is in a real, you consider the higher power, the universe, God, whatever you want to speak to.
And, I make no bones about it, that Christ is my healer, and I kind of lead with that when I speak to people, and I'm not ashamed of it. I go into some situations a little bit cautiously, but I've never been, nobody's thrown rotten tomatoes at me yet. Hopefully y'all didn't bring any. But I'm one of those people that leads with it and talks about it because I want the church to overcome their thoughts of, antipathy and the stigma and everything surrounding addiction. I'm one of those people beating my head up against the wall at the church trying to get them to get it. But at the same time, I love the church. And I know that the church is, the stigma is toward them too. And a lot of times it's because people have been injured by the church, or they perceive that they've been injured. I'm not saying everybody perceives it. Many injuries are very real by the church, and many are because there's not really, it's a religion instead of a relationship, and there's a difference. And so I think helping people to understand that, and I gotta stop. You don't have tomatoes, do you? But anyway, I'll stop there.
I'll just add really quickly, we need more people like you in churches. So thank you. And I think it's wonderful that you're speaking on this from this aspect. It's desperately needed in so many churches. So thank you.
Friends, will you show appreciation for these brave panelists up here? Thank you so much for sharing of yourselves and your stories. So, if you hadn't gotten the theme today, it's connecting, isn't it? Making connections. Our next presenters are talking about building community with connections. And so that's Andy Clements and Tanner Clements are coming up here on the stage. I invite them to come up. Andy is a professor at East Tennessee State University, and she is Associate Director of Research Design and Implementation for the ETSU Ballard Health Strong Brain Institute. She's co-founder and president of Uplight Appalachia. Tanner has his Master of Divinity as well as his undergraduate degree, and is very engaged with Uplight Appalachia, and is, can I call you a digital media specialist? Is that appropriate? You like that? Whatever you want to. Okay. Thank you all for being here.
This is entirely on faith that there is going to
Yeah,
be...
we sent. Do you have our presentation up there? If not, I'll just wing it, but it'd be better if we had it. You'll like us a whole lot more if we had it. No, maybe?
Working on it, okay.
That's fine. Hey, there it is. We got it. Cool. Before we get started, this is just for us because we talk about all of these things that we're going to talk about all the time, but it's nice to know who our audience is. So I'm just out of curiosity, how many of you are just community members who are here because you're interested in learning more about this? That's what I thought. How many of you work somewhere in the recovery space? Is that going to be literally every other hand? And out of curiosity, how many of you are part of some sort of faith community or church? A lot of you too. Good. Because I loved that last question because that sets up so much of what we're hoping to do, which is to hopefully motivate and equip the church to help bridge that community gap, help to create the community, help people find what we think really is going to be truly healing for people. Oh, there's the clicker. That's even better. That's perfect. Thank you. I was just about to that point where I'm like, I'm going to need to be able to change these. So just really quick to introduce us, we're from Uplift, Appalachia, and that really is our mission, that we want to replace addiction and mental health challenges with flourishing, and that we think that the church is the missing piece, the thing that has not yet been fully activated to help really make that, life-changing, that earth-shattering change in our society. So again, he already talked a little bit about who we are, but I titled myself Media Training Director because I thought it sounded fancy, and I got to give myself my own title, and so I did that. But I did spend over 8 years as a bivocational pastor at a church that we'll talk about here in just a second. I did web design and video creation at ETSU for 15 years, so I have a lot of experience kind of telling stories and that sort of thing. And then, not as practical for today, but I am a certified personal trainer. I do some of that stuff on the side. And you can talk a little bit about it.
And he did say, I am a psychology professor. I am a researcher at the Strong Brain Institute, where what the Strong Brain Institute is we train about and research adverse childhood experiences, trauma-informed care, and do a lot of spreading that message around. A lot of my life has been trying to overlap my Venn diagrams because full-time ETSU professor, full-time Strong Brain Institute, full-time president of Uplift Appalachia, and now they're beginning to converge because now Uplift and the SBI are sharing a grant to do trauma and addiction training. So it's all working out.
And this idea of bridging the gap really is kind of where we're going to kind of focus a lot of what we're talking about today is why we believe the church is an important piece to this puzzle, but also why, as community organizations, we think that the church should be viewed as a resource that people should want to take advantage of and use to help the people that they're burdened to see find recovery, find the community that they're going to need. Everything that we've talked about all day has just set up everything that I think we want to talk about, the things that we're wanting to do.
You teed us up in the morning for part of it. You teed us up right just a few minutes ago for the rest. So
yeah, it's
perfect.
Great job. It was perfect. So that being said, so how do we get here? So we're just going to start with just a little bit of a timeline so you can kind of understand who we are. We're going to talk through all of these points and some of the big light bulb moments, the things that really changed for us so that we could really become motivated to use the church as an answer in a way that we think it's been meant to be the whole time. So I already mentioned that I was a bivocational pastor at a small church in downtown Johnson City called Christ Reconciled Church. And I want to make sure you kind of get the picture for what it is, because in downtown Johnson City, we were on the bullseye for the high crime, high poverty, high homelessness, high drug use, everything that somebody would probably read about in the paper and think, man, that's not where we want to go. That was where we planted our church. And it wasn't on purpose originally. It was we felt burdened to minister somewhere, and this was the place that we found ourselves being planted. And we spent 8 years building relationships with lots of people in the community that had said, the church has done a good job of occasionally coming in and kind of touching base, doing a thing for us, doing a one-week event or something like that. But we really wanted to move in and actually live with the people and spend our lives really getting to know and be a part of their lives as well. And a couple of the hallmarks of that was really just spending time walking around, talking to people on the street as we met them, and then having meals with them. We ate a lot. We still like to eat a lot. I think one of the things that we've learned over the course of doing this is just spending time sitting around a table and eating a meal together has been one of the most impactful things that we can do to really help somebody feel connected to us and feel connected to others and feel like they have a place where they belong. And that's just through sharing a meal together. And that was a real hallmark of what we did there. But because of that, we built lots of relationships with people who were struggling with substance use and were struggling with homelessness. And that led to your work with the Day Reporting Center.
Right, and I do have one other question. How many of you here know Becky Haas or have listened to, yeah, that's what I thought. Okay, so I'm that other person that started out doing the trauma-informed care training with Becky Haas before she became a world-renowned person. But the way she started was, well, I met her back when she worked at ETSU, but she ended up managing a grant for the city of Johnson City to reduce crime. And our church was planted right in the middle of the area she was supposed to be reducing crime, and she sort of overcommitted herself to the things she was doing and needed a lot of volunteers. I was her friend. We had a church. Hey, friend, would you volunteer at the Day Reporting Center, which she created. Now they're across the state because things she touches just happen that way. But it's a prison diversion program, if you're not familiar with it, where people go on a phased program, 4 days, 3 days, 2 days, 1 day, instead of going off to prison for a long, long time. All of them high need, high risk felony offenders with addictions. And so she said, would you go and take lunch and do a Bible study with the ladies? And I said, what if I just go take lunch and be their friend? And so that's the way it started. And it started out with me and 2 ladies. And then the fellow who was taking lunch to the guys stopped and they would pout at the door. And so then it was me and 2 ladies and 6 guys. And then over the course of 5.5 years of taking lunch every week, it was me and 50 people. And and I don't even cook, which is hilarious. It's like God has a sense of humor. But anyway, but through doing that, what it was, I was a volunteer, so I could have relationships that the staff couldn't. I could text with them. I could be their Facebook friend. I could go pick them up places and not tell anybody or fill out any forms. And so I just got to know people who were really struck. And the thing is, I kept saying, they're so stuck. They're just so stuck. And I said, we got to do something. And I thought, well, what if we mobilize the church to address addiction? That would be great. It was like God and I were thinking about it. I wasn't even directly praying about it. It was just like, this was an idea. It's like, why aren't we doing this? And so ended up being approached by somebody a couple of years later that there were several things that, like meetings, this, that, and the other, but then Becky and I, again, Becky's like always here, we ended up getting invited to lunch by this fellow. Didn't know who he was. I had seen him at another meeting I'd been at, and he said, y'all want to have lunch? Sure, whatever. And so he opens this prospectus, and he says, I'm thinking we should mobilize the church to address addiction. And I said, yes, Lord? Because it was like, here it was. And it was like all of these, he wanted to have a summit with faith leaders and physicians and clinics and whatever. And I thought, that sounds like a great idea, and you're already arranging it. And then he showed me the list of speakers he'd already lined up, and 2 of them were my book crushes. Like, you have a book crush that's like somebody that changes your life. Well, 2 of the books that changed my life, the speakers were speaking there. I said, are they gonna be there? And he said, yeah. I said, I'm in. And so out of that came the Holy Friendship Summit. That was in 2018. We ended up getting a HRSA grant, started the Holy Friendship Collaborative, which was, that Taranya was the executive director for a while. And that's how we got connected through that. And so that was sort of this beginning of mobilizing the church, a more organized route to
trying to understand what are the needs, and a lot of it at that point was just kind of assessing what is it that we can do, what is it that we need, how can the church respond? Absolutely. And so as we were working on that, and our church at the same time was working on learning how to better build relationships with people who were struggling with addiction, we had kind of 2 light bulb moments. And I'll talk about one, then I'll let her talk about one as well, because she's the psychologist, and that's a brain synapse, and I'm gonna let her talk about that. But we had kind of these 2 big light bulb moments along the way. And what we were seeing is, with the people that we were interacting with that were either struggling with addiction or were just struggling with their recovery and finding consistency within that, is that there were people who were giving, we had a small church. I mean, we were 35, 40 people strong on a great week. And those people were different every week just because of kind of the nature of the population that we were working with. But what we found was that half of our church was giving a ride to the other half of the church to the service every week and back home. and then maybe occasionally taking them by their doctor's office, and then maybe occasionally taking them to a court appointment or something like that. But along the way, they were building relationships that were way more powerful than the relationships they would have just gotten while they were just talking to each other at church before or after a service. And what we saw was like, this is a really easy way for people who know an answer, who have a message of hope for somebody who is in this deep, dark struggle, this spiral that they keep finding themselves trapped in, can't get out of. And these relationships that they were building along the way were so powerful that they were seeing so much more growth and success in their life just by virtue of somebody giving somebody a ride back and forth. And so as all these questions with the Holy Friendship Collaborative, how can we mobilize the church? We said, what if we just got people to give somebody a ride from one place to another and build relationships with them along the way? And so around that time, we started brainstorming this idea that would become Uplift Appalachia. Yes, it was a play on lift. We thought that was really catchy. My dad came up with that, and he was very proud of himself. But we took that idea, and we said, now we got to figure out, how are we going to, justifiably say we think this is working? And that happened around the same time that you were talking about some research with some, and I'll just let you take it from there. Because
Okay. And thanks for even introducing the rat park thing, because it shortens what I need to say now. So yeah, this is my synapse, not really a brain synapse. Anyway, it's between neurons. Right. So I want to go geeky for just a second, because I did this little brief Scotland tour back in the summer, and everywhere I spoke to somebody, they'd go, "Oh, you need to tell everybody that." So I'm going to tell you this. It's just our secret. But there was another study that was talked about, even done before the rat park study, by a fellow named Panksepp. And what this study was, it was also rats, and what they did was they were giving, so baby rats and mamas usually like to be together. You take the baby away from the mom, the baby screams. They just, like our babies would scream if they're taken away. But what they found was, if you gave them an opioid, they didn't cry. They didn't care. It's like it filled that receptor. And so one of the things that we've really looked at recently, and would love to do the research on it, but it's really expensive and hard to do, is looking at our endogenous opioid system. Fancy words. But so when we're talking about neglect and abuse and so forth early in childhood, brain being built by 3 years old and things like that, what's happening is your brain is getting built around whatever your experiences are. And so we talk about, this nurturing and the looking at you, looking for somebody looking for you. I'm gonna use that, I hadn't heard that. But that the serve and return, the back and forth, the having somebody snuggle you and cuddle you and change your diaper and feed you and so forth, it's activating natural opioids that our bodies make. Happens in the baby, happens in the mama, happens in the whoever's in the relationship. It happens when you fall in love. It happens when you laugh at jokes. It happens when you run a marathon, except I never have and I'm not gonna. But apparently people have said that it happens then too. I think I would just die and it wouldn't matter. But so our bodies are built to create these opioids. So opioids aren't bad. We're built with receptors for that. It dulls our pain, it makes us feel good, it makes us feel safe, it makes us feel warm, all those things. And so if things are going normally, we're good. But if you have a child that is neglected, that's not being filled, they have hungry, empty receptors. And so, we know that ACEs very much predict later drug use and misuse of all kinds of substances and other behavioral things that also can cause those receptors to be filled. And so what happens is somebody gets older and then they experience, you've heard people, I'm sure you've heard people say, the first time I used this, I wanted to feel that way forever. It's like, this is the love that I have never felt. And it's true, it's feeling that same thing, it feels the same way. But if you're not getting it somewhere else and you're getting it there, well, why wouldn't you do it? And so it predisposes much more so people that have had neglectful or painful past or whatever. It does kill, opioids and other substances can do this too, but it really does activate, it makes pain reduced. Physical pain, emotional pain. they activate the same way. So it's working for that. And so that is one of the things that has motivated us. And I'm going to just go ahead and say our long-term goal is, can we create so much connection with people that we can restart that system? Because when you're using any kind of substance, and unfortunately even medications for treatment, any kind of external substance shuts down your internal system. And so when you stop using whatever it is, or if you can't get to it or whatever, you don't have a source, you're gonna feel this misery that wants the substance, and your own system doesn't take over immediately. And we're wondering if we can create so much connection, so much relationship, that it restarts that and actually replaces the need for the external thing. I mean, that's a big ask. It's a big ask, but
yeah, and so we saw this kind of practical way that we can build connection with people. We saw that there was kind of a practical benefit to that. And now we're starting to ask these questions about, hey, and we've already heard this said multiple times today, we are created in such a way, we are made to exist in some sort of connection with community, with people. We aren't good alone. And we have, I'm not going to start preaching. I'm not going to start preaching. I would really want to start preaching, but I'm not going to start preaching.
We have a longer training.
But that being said, so we started seeing all of these things coming together, all of these connections being made between this kind of practical building community, and we're seeing how our bodies are built in certain ways to exist best when we are in connection with another. And so we kind of started asking this question, if we're going to try to find healing, oh, there it is, finding true healing. What if community, as we were designed, is actually the thing that God intended for his church to use to fix all of these problems that we see? And so we are coming at this from, we're asking this question. I think you already know kind of how we think we should answer this question. Like, I'm not just going to spoil it. We think the answer to this question is yes. We think that the church is uniquely able to fill that community need that people have that will actually help them find a much more holistic version of healing beyond just keeping them alive, but actually leading them toward lives of flourishing. That's the premise that we're working from, is that we think the church is able to provide something beyond what anyone else is able to offer because of their kind of unique calling. And we think that the church ought to want to do this anyways. So much of what our work is trying to, and this kind of goes back to the question that got asked at the end of that last section, was that why isn't the church, how do you get the church to want to do this? The church doesn't seem to be at all interested in this. And that's,
or if they do it, they might do it badly.
They might do it poorly. And that's what we're trying to figure out. And so we have this kind of idea that we like to call wraparound care. If you're in, the recovery community space, you hear the word wraparound, but that tends to refer more to like services. Making sure you're getting all of your different needs that you have met by all of the different services and really having all those services available to you. When we say wraparound care, we actually mean that in as physical a sense as appropriate. Like, we actually mean like giving somebody a hug and being there with them the whole time and staying with them while they're walking through whatever the troubles and struggles, things that they may be experiencing. And that we all need that. We all need a community around us to help us get through the life that we're all kind of going through at the same time. You need to have lots of people in your life. And one of the things that we tend to talk about a lot, and this tends to be one of the problems that, coming from the church side, tends to be, we tend to think one-on-one, walking with somebody side by side. But we need community for the people that are providing the community to the people that are in recovery. Everybody needs a lot of people around them. And it's going to take a lot of us to get that accomplished, to really be effective in that in the long term. So that's what we mean when we talk about wraparound care. That being then, there it is. So what are we doing? So we really are trying to motivate and equip. And that we're looking at this from kind of two perspectives. One, we want to motivate and equip the church to be able to do this, because one of the things that was said during that last session as well is that the church has some idea that they want to help, but they're not very good at it. Or they don't even understand that people have already had experiences with the churches, and those experiences were very negative. Or those experiences led to some of the trauma that they've already experienced. There's a lot of church hurt, and we understand that, but sometimes the church isn't very good at taking an introspective look at itself and saying, wow, there's a lot that we're really bad at, and there's a lot that we might even be making worse by virtue of the way that we're handling a lot of these situations, by looking at things in these really black and white sets of terms. And so we really are trying to start with just kind of this baseline understanding, and this is where I would tend to get preachy, and I'm going to try not to do that. But just to say that it ought to be that the church ought to want to do this. This sounds like overly simplified. There was a movie that I absolutely hate that was really effective at making me think about this. It's pretty old now. Does anybody remember the movie The Breakup? It was like Jennifer Aniston, and so, yeah, you remember the movie The Breakup? But I hated it, because it's not called The Get Back Together. It's called The Breakup. And spoiler alert, they break up. But there's this one point while they're going through the breakup in the middle where she's like, I want you to want to do the dishes. He said, why would I want to do this? She's like, I don't want you to just do the dishes. I want you to want to do the dishes. And this is kind of the place that we're at with the church. It's not just that we want you to go serve on a kind of a one-off, put on a Bible camp week for the kids in your local neighborhood, and then kind of head back to your high places on the hills, that sort of thing. We don't want that. We want you to want to serve people and love people all the time in a really intense, impersonal, intentional sort of way. And that's going to be challenging, and that's going to be costly, and it's going to be hard, but it's going to be worth it. We already talked about that, right? So we're trying to start with just telling the church, you ought to want to do this. Why is the church uniquely equipped and potentially way more impactful in helping people find recovery and then stay in recovery? But that all has to come from having a really good understanding. So we do start with an understanding of trauma and ACEs. She wrote a book called The Trauma-Informed Church, and we do trainings on this idea of the church being trauma-informed. And we try to use the exact same language that any other community organization is using when we're talking about ACEs and trauma, because we're trying to create this same language for both groups to get to use. We want them to understand addiction. Some of that's going to come from our personal experience and experiences that people that we've talked with have had, but also just understanding, like we just started talking about, the brain science and the chemistry that's going on at work, but also a realistic look at what does it look like practically on the ground for somebody who is struggling with substance use? What does the economy of that look like? What does their life revolve around? And because we were able to build lots of relationships over the course of 8.5 years downtown, we have lots of experiences that we can kind of share that kind of help inform the church in a way so it demystifies what this kind of work is going to begin to look like. And then the rest of that really is just kind of trying to provide some application. Here's some ways, talking about giving somebody a ride or trying to, have a meal with people on a frequent basis, but also find a way to make that sustainable. Because, like we said, it's going to be challenging. There are going to be things that you're going to face that you're going to want to quit. And so we try to encourage the church to know what they're getting into so that when it does get challenging, when it does get difficult, they're ready to kind of continue on with that work as they go on. So, that being said, in trying to get churches and organizations connected, there's obviously lots of barriers, and you've had a lot of experience with some
I've had a lot of experience with that, right? Yeah. So I do straddle both worlds. I'm in the higher ed world. I work with a lot of clinics. I also have worked with corrections programs and also training churches. And so I mentioned, I think I mentioned, but we have right now an opioid abatement grant that is specifically to cross-train community organizations and churches, and we've gone further. I mean, we'd already been doing trainings and covering some of the same topics in community organizations, and then covering them in churches, and doing this really faith-based, scriptural-based training with the churches, and then, just regular secular training with the community organizations. And so what we did, and I'm going to give you a quick little case study, because tomorrow night I'll tell you about tomorrow night in a minute, but tomorrow night is a co-happening between a church and a clinic. First time ever, and so it's working, it's just taken years to do it. But so what we found was we got church folks ready, trained, prepared. Clinic, we want the church, and then it's like, let's put them together, and there were so many, we don't want you to do it that way, but you have to do this. And it's like, we didn't think that's what we were gonna do. And so even though both of them had been trained separately, they still were speaking different languages. It's just like you go to the global cafe, and half the people speak one language and half the people speak the other. And so this grant is allowing us to do cross-training in which we're actually, with the churches, we're talking about, this is what the clinics are like, and this is what the clinics need, and these are the things that you're gonna have to do, and it might not make sense to you, but they have to do it, so you have to do it. And then we go to the clinics and we say, this is how the church is learning, and this is where their motivation's coming from. This is the Bible-y talk they're gonna do, and this is why, and so far they have a tip sheet for tomorrow night that's like, this is where they're coming from, show some grace. This is where they're coming from, show some grace. Aren't we glad we're all gonna be together? So I'll just say that some of the things, it's like churches don't necessarily understand all the medical stuff. We try to get them up to speed on the things that they're gonna need. We also, our coaching resources, it's like you run into something you don't know, ask us. And we're sort of straddling the worlds and being the interpreters, and we would much rather you not bail. Ask us, we'll figure it out. There is a concern from the community organizations, because a lot of the people are in churches that are in those organizations. You raised your hands, you obviously are, but a lot are not. A lot have church hurt. And so, there's this fear of, well, they're probably just gonna come in and proselytize people, or they're gonna have their tracts and they're gonna be slipping them in the hot dog buns or something, and so it's like, in this tip sheet that I wrote, we just own it. It's like, we're not there to do that. It's like, we understand that we sin too, people sin, everybody sins, it's okay. That's not why we're there. We're not gonna make you, force feed you Christianity. That's up to God. We're gonna be there to love you. And so some of these sorts of things to help the clinic understand, we're not gonna threaten your people. We love your people, we know you love your people, we don't wanna hurt your people. And so, the other thing is, though, sometimes the church feels undervalued. Sometimes I do think the church is underutilized, but I understand why the church is underutilized if there's this fear. And so what we're trying to do is help the clinics to see that the church can be a valuable resource, and there are ways to ensure that. And then you've just got bureaucratic safeguards. So let me give you, I mentioned it took years. We started 2 years ago this fall trying to partner with this clinic. And all we were gonna do is have a meal every other month, that the church people were gonna come and help bring the food, eat with people, make friends, and hopefully be a new community for folks that really needed a new community because they left their old community when they stopped using. And so we were one meal in, about to have the next, and someone somewhere up the administrative line said, oh, whoa, and this is like after hours, this is not during clinic hours. Oh, whoa, you can't do that. They need to do HIPAA training, bloodborne pathogen training, this, that, and I'm thinking, this is for grandma to eat a pie with someone, And so I said, the people that we had at that time, it's like, yes, these people can probably do that, but there are gonna be many situations where that's gonna be such a huge barrier. We're gonna lose our volunteers. We've got all these people ready to be this workforce, and that's gonna run them off. And so they said, well, let us check, don't do anything yet. So we went ahead and did the trainings, and we got the first 2 people certified, and there were like 5 more. And then they said, oh, it's too expensive to do that. We're not gonna do that anymore. So they'd already done the training, but they didn't get the certification. So it's like, okay, you're shooting me in the foot here, guys. and so then they said, wait, let's let our attorneys talk about it. So then we had 3 months of attorney meetings to see whether grandma had to do bloodborne pathogen training to eat a pie. And they came back after 3 months and said, oh, wait, you don't have to do any of that. And so here we are 6 months in. And so then we went back to the clinic. We said, this is great. And they said, okay, well, we know you don't have to do that, but we want people to sign a disclaimer when they come in, or a release, so that they know that it's not a medical appointment. So, if they talk to you about things that are HIPAA covered, it's not a clinic thing. Fine, they can write their names. So we did that. And then we said, all right, the church people would like to come. And they said, well, we really trust you Uplift people, but I don't know about those church people, so just y'all come. And it's like, the whole point is to get the church there. And so that's why I'm so excited about tomorrow night, because tomorrow night we're doing a trunk or treat, and we've got clinic people doing the trunks, and we've got the church doing the food, and everybody's gonna be there together, and the church people are gonna bring their kids, and the clinic people are gonna bring their kids, and nobody's gonna know who's who. And that's the whole point. And so, it's like, just keep doing it, and eventually.
Well, I was gonna say, it seems like that's a lot of work for one event.
for one
And that-
event.
and that's maybe disheartening to some people. The thing, and I'm gonna show a stat in just a minute about just why we think this still is worth pursuing, because there's so many churches. Even if it takes 2 years, if we got every church helping in one small way, we could make such an amazing impact.
Amazing.
So because there's still church barriers too, and you'll note that bureaucratic safeguards is on the list on both sides, because I don't know, for those of you that are familiar with the church can get in its own way too, because they like to have their committees on committees just like everybody else. And those committees on committees like to sit there and talk through everything and make sure that we have everything, every T crossed, every I dotted, and every newsletter printed out just right, and every brochure clearly defined. And those kinds of things tend to slow us down. So we understand that there are going to be other barriers. There's stigma both ways, right? There's stigma from people looking at the church and saying, those people don't understand my situation, those people don't really love me, or those people have hurt me in the past. And there's stigma from the church side saying those people have to get clean before they can come into our church. And both of those are places that we feel like we can help kind of demystify what this relationship can look like for people. And that both sides ought to want to work together, because it's not about, it's about the people who are struggling, that are needing the support, that are needing the community, way more than all of the things that sometimes keep us afraid. One of the other barriers that we've found recently, and this is kind of a new thing that we're kind of thinking through, specifically in seeing how effective the church was in quickly responding to Hurricane Helene. It's like there's this thing, the church is ready and mobilized and out there, cutting down trees and shoveling, and that was amazing. It was amazing to see the church's response in that way. That was a really tangible thing that the church could see in front of them. Whereas addiction to the church, especially to churches that maybe have been a little bit internally focused, or maybe have not experienced relationship building with people who have struggled in this way, it's a less tangible idea. It's just kind of out there. They can't really put a face on it. They can't really understand what's out there. So it's harder for them to connect with the idea that the church ought to want to serve people who are struggling this way. And they may not realize that there's half their congregation that is actively connected to it, or have family members, or that it's already there, but it's not tangible. And that sometimes prevents the church from really seeing, what's the return on my investment in this area? I can go chop down a tree and move it out of somebody's yard, and I know I've done a thing, and somebody will recognize that the church has helped me do that thing. But walking with somebody over the course of 5 years who's going to be in and out of different situations, they're going to go ups and downs, may not seem like something where they're actually finding the value in that. And that's unfortunate. And that's the thing that we're trying to grab the church a little bit by the shoulders and shake them and say, hey, it's still worth it. It's still worth it.
So honestly, we were a little jealous at the hurricane response, because it's
we
like,
want
we've been
that to
telling you
happen.
people are
It's
dying
good.
and you're not coming.
It's good, but we want more.
But now it's like, no, we're going to reframe that into, look what you can do. Let's keep
Because
doing
here's
it.
the thing.
Here's a different crisis.
And I'm going to put these stats up here. You already know these stats. There are a lot of people that are dying of overdose. There are a lot of babies that are being born with neonatal abstinence syndrome. I don't need you, this group especially, we know what these numbers are, but the church doesn't. And so we want to get these kinds of facts in front of the church and say, your whole community, your population, the people in your church are already struggling with this. And you ought to seek the welfare of the city where I've put you. This is the kind of thing that we like to spend time teaching the church, is saying you ought to be concerned for the people that you are around, not just yourself, but actually for the people who are feeling the effects of all of these things that you can't even really fix, other than to just be the way that you were honestly created to be. We've talked about, like, our bodies work best when we're connected to each other because of the way that we were put together. We feel that the same thing is true of the church. The church was put together to be human connection for people who need to find healing. And that can look a lot of different ways, but to us, this is the bottom line, that the church ought to want to serve people, and we think that people struggling with substance use, finding recovery, mental health challenges, whatever that may look like, should not be excluded from that list. In fact, they should be one of the priorities from the very beginning. So, why should community organizations want churches to help? You want to talk through some of those numbers?
Sure. Yeah. So one of the things that this got me my first grant, it got me my second grant, and that is there are not enough humans to be paid to love people. It's like you can have, I love certified peer recovery specialists. I love that. I love counselors. I love psychologists. I should have loved psychologists. I am one.
They're right.
All that, yeah. Can't say the word very well. But it's like, we cannot pay enough people to love you all the time. You know, it's like if this really is wrapping around and knowing you and knowing your world and being in it with you, it's going to take a lot more people. So there's just not enough bandwidth. We talk bandwidth a lot to support them. But one of the things and I found this, and it's a couple years old now, because I had looked it up. I'm not exactly sure what this number is right now, but very close. And it's Northeast Tennessee, Southwest Virginia. We wrote that first HRSA grant covering 21 counties. In those 21 counties, there were 2,300 faith communities. 2,300. Now, some of those are, 10, 12, 15 people. Some of those are 1,200 people. But if you look at our overdose death rate, if each church took a person and just was very close and monitored and so forth, you wouldn't have those same overdose deaths happening. You would have people for those people. And so that is one of the things. It is just extra hands, extra people that are available.
We really think the church is the biggest untapped resource in this space, is that the church is being underutilized and the church is allowing itself to be underutilized. So we kind of look at it from both ways. We want the community, the recovery community to see this as a potential valuable resource for people that need to be supported. And we want the church to see this as an opportunity to help meet people's needs in a really tangible way. So that kind of leads us to...
We should say, though. Yeah. We should say, though. We do have some extra things that are not just people. It's like, if there's a creator of the universe, which I absolutely know there is, then biblical things have worked for a long time, and we have that. And they work even if you don't believe in God or whatever. But it's not just let's follow a protocol or whatever. We believe that, honest to goodness, He's giving us the wisdom in how to care for people. He's enabling us to love people. And so you've got this huge army, but you've also got this huge army that can do it for free and do it really well when they know what they've been prepared.
You started preaching more than I did.
I did start preaching, didn't I?
Yeah. So to go back to our what now? So what we're really wanting to try to do is help to merge that gap between the faith community and the recovery community, help to create common language. We're doing that through a lot of different trainings, that sort of thing. But really we want to, and hopefully as we're talking through this, maybe you have a church that's near your organization, or maybe you already have some relationships with some churches. Maybe you're already seeing some ways that those two things can kind of come together. We don't want this just to be we're going to tell you we think this is a problem and leave it with that.
Right.
Obviously, like we said, we have some ideas. We have some specific solutions: ride shares, housing, job readiness training, these sorts of things. We're partnering with organizations to help provide those sorts of things. But every organization has a different population that's right around them that have specific needs, and every church is going to be equipped differently to do those sorts of things. So we don't want to presume that we have all of the exact answers that you're going to need, but what we do know is that kind of from a macro level, that human connection piece that we talked about, that wraparound care, intentionally increasing interpersonal connection, we think is going to actually provide healing in a much more powerful way than a lot of what has been attempted up to this point.
Right. And you mentioned the ones that are already around and already doing things. There might be churches that are already volunteering or whatever. You also might know, and I hate to say this, you might know some churches in your sphere that are actually doing more harm than good. And one of the things that when we first started doing the why the church and why should you do this, why are you here, trainings, it's like churches don't invite you to come in and tell you they're doing something wrong. So that might not happen, but if there are ways to have either some of our information, or, we'll do trainings anywhere, anytime. Anytime. But if there are ways that we can help you or people in your arena to get whatever the parts of this are that would be helpful to walk with people well, to support you well. It's not even just supporting people in recovery, but even people that are working in that field. We said a while ago It's like the helpers also need help. The family members also need help. And so there are all these layers of everybody needing support. And so we want to try to help that whole ecosystem to be working better.
There's a whole group of people whose express purpose is to be in community with one another to help people find healing and grow, right? And if that group is out there, we should take advantage of that, especially in an area where we know that human connection is going to be the thing that helps people find healing long term. So, that being said, does anybody have any questions about anything that we've asked? We'd love to answer.
Yeah, we would love to just have some discussion.
Have a conversation. You got an idea for us? We'll take it. We'll write it down and we'll go in.
Pepper us with hard questions, whatever. Or easy ones. Yeah. Yes.
I'll give this one.
Yeah. We can stand close together. That's fine.
Because it's exactly what you're saying of what I was saying up there. It was like when I went to Wilmington and there was so many people and we were all connected and I thrived, you know. And then when I came back here and there was one but nobody else. I didn't know anybody else in recovery. And I grieved, you know, like it was really hard. But yeah, that's a big thing. And
think about it. People are filling your opioid receptors.
Oh, yeah.
And when you don't have that, you're in withdrawal from people.
Yeah.
It's
was
same
really
thing.
hard. Exactly the same.
Yeah.
But yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Well, and let me say, one of the things that we did a few years ago also was we cataloged all the recovery meetings across the area, and we have a searchable database online, but it's not updated because of technical things, but we're working on getting it updated. We have the updated list. We just don't have the updated list feeding out here. But we've tracked recovery meetings, and one of the things that we would love to do is have more recovery meetings occur. And we tracked it across COVID, and one of the things that happened, there were not a lot, but there were even across the rural areas, particularly Southwest Virginia was one of the areas where there were a nice scattering, not a lot, but a nice scattering. And then when COVID happened, they evaporated. And then when they came back, there was lots of, we've got to start them back. But so many of them rebirthed in towns. So Johnson City got a bunch and Kingsport got a bunch. Maybe Marion did, I don't know. But the further out you got, there were none. I mean, there were none. Zero. And I think some of that is, you can just hop online. Well, that is not the same. It is not the same. That your people, it's helpful, but there are people that can't get there. They don't have that access. And so we would love for churches to start. It doesn't have to be AA. It could be AA. It could be one of the organized kinds. It could just be a let's get together and have meals and love each other is fine, but places for people. I mean, I love what you set up because it's just like places for people to be together and share life together. And food. Food's great. He's gonna throw us another one.
I am curious because that was a great point. I really hadn't even thought about just the mass response to something like Helene, and we've seen that traditionally over the years of the church.
It was so fast.
What? And clearly, like I wanted to jump out and go do, like the pictures are heartbreaking and devastating, but so is the overdose epidemic, and the numbers much more intense than in terms of loss of life. So I wonder, like, what is the gap there? Why is the heartbreak not felt at such an intense level for that makes it, well, you talked a lot, like this want to. Like, there's no doubt in my mind there was a want to when we saw the pictures of the hurricane. And it's not a lack, it's not I don't know, because we've seen these images playing out, you know, on television. And
yeah, I mean, I think that, like I said, I think the fact that it was tangible is a thing. Like, I can see it and I know what I have to do. There's also, and this, I'm saying this as a guy who is very active in the church, so I know I'm kind of making a subtle dig at my people, and that's okay. I can do that. But it's like, it's tangible, but it's also temporary. And I think it's like, once we clear all these trees away, we're done clearing the trees, and we can go back to business as usual. Whereas I think the ask a lot of times when we're talking about addiction and recovery is there is no end date on the overdose epidemic, right? You know, and so I think we are really good at finding things that we can do and then come back to home base and feel safe again. And we can kind of lose track of that. Yeah.
I just wanted to throw out there too, and to answer your question, there's a misunderstanding that, first of all, education is key, because many people think these people did this to themselves. Helene was totally out of anyone's control. These people who have opioid use disorder, it's the choices they made, they did it to themselves, and they don't want to quit. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I was gonna mention that too. One, the coming back and going, look at my Instagram, I was so helpful, and that's helpful. But then also, yeah, it's the oh, this came out of the blue and it was a natural disaster and there's nothing they could have done, except for the people that said, well, why didn't you follow better building codes? And I said, have you been to the hollers of North Carolina? It's like, building codes? What? So, but yeah, I think there is some of that, because you had a choice. And I think if you've never spent time with somebody, maybe early on you had a choice. There comes a point you don't have a choice. There's not a choice. Yeah.
And one last little piece on that. I think the church is really good at ignoring that problem, because, like I said, you can't see it in the same way. And so we assume we've got that under control. We'll talk about it kind of at a big meta level, but we don't really get into the weeds and say, you know what? These people we know are struggling with that, and we've had people in our congregations pass away because of this. And we don't want to talk about that, because I think that the church is naturally inclined to not want to air its dirty laundry. We want to look clean and pristine and say, if we're being saved by Jesus, look at how clean and nice we are, and this is the good. We're good now, and we're not comfortable as a church often saying, look at how messy this is. And that's one of the things we like to talk about, is like, I go back to our church plant a lot. It didn't, and I should say, that church closed during COVID because we'd done such a good job of getting to know our neighborhood, we could no longer sustainably meet the needs of the people. And we were going to start causing more hurt than we were going to be helpful. And so we made sure that all those people ended up kind of shepherded into new church families and all of that, so that they were cared for. But that whole church was kind of built around this idea of, we are a mess. And I think the church could do a better job of saying, we are a mess, and we're a bunch of people that are messy, and the things that we're dealing with are messy. And until we get better at kind of airing our dirty laundry in that way, and being and owning who we are, and that we are being saved, not that we're making ourselves look nice and clean, that's going to kind of limit the church's desire to really be super helpful. Which is why, in this way, like we can come in as kind of that knight in shining armor really easily, but sometimes to say we don't have a solution for everything, minus our faith. My life verse, Proverbs 14:4. Anybody got that one memorized? Proverbs 14:4. Where there are no oxen, the manger is clean, but abundant crops come by the strength of the ox. I'll let you get that picture in your mind. Basically, if you're going to get anything done, there's going to be a whole lot of poop you got to clean up. That's my life verse. Because if you're going to get something done, it's going to get messy.
Any other questions? Well, will you express appreciation to Tanner and Andy Clements? What a good day we have had. Thank you for being part of this. Keith, I'm going to ask you to come up. I didn't ask you beforehand. I'm putting you on the spot. I need somebody to draw the couple of giveaways. So if you'll bring that up here on your way. In your packet, there were some evaluation forms, and we invite you to take a few minutes to complete those. You can put them on the registration table as you exit today. But let's see, what else am I supposed to say? We're certainly grateful for Bob Watkins and the Lincoln Theater for giving us great help today. What a great venue for this event. Will you express appreciation to Bob, please? And the live stream that has been coordinated by folks from Emory and Henry College, thank you for your extraordinary efforts. We've had 10 to 20 people on the live stream today. One more. All right, so we have 2 of these therapeutic massages that we'll be able to distribute. And so Keith, pick one. A lot of pressure. Okay, I, Cindy Newman, nominate Tammy Bice. Cindy, is it okay if I read this? Okay. To receive a gift of a free hour-long therapeutic massage because she is dedicated to working with individuals with substance use disorder and is a champion for our community. Yeah, hand that to her. Okay. And then a second. And then a second one. Okay. I, Teresa Burris, nominate Leslie Peterson. Are you Leslie? You seemed surprised, I think. Leslie works tirelessly to serve Southwest Virginia and make our communities healthier. So what a nice testament to you. So I want you to know, look how many people have been given, you've been nominated. And what a nice testimony to all of you, because I bet most of us are in here. And so thank you for being part of this. Helen Keller said, alone we can do so little. Together we can do so much. And I think that's a good way for us to depart today. Thank you for your time. We hope you'll participate in the Appalachian Center for Hope future things that we do. Have a great afternoon.